The year was 2347, and space had grown both familiar and dangerous for humanity. After more than a century of exploration, trade, and uneasy treaties, humans had spread across dozens of star systems. They had learned how to live on barren moons, floating cities, and worlds with skies of green and red. Yet even with all these achievements, peace in the galaxy was fragile. The great powers of different species kept an eye on each other, always waiting for weakness. Commander Ethan Price stood on the bridge of the Liberty Dawn, one of the newer heavy cruisers in the fleet. The ship was sleek, with long rail cannon batteries along both sides, and an engine core that could burn brighter than the sun when it needed speed. Around him, his crew worked in quiet focus, their eyes on glowing holoscreens filled with data. There was no battle yet, but tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Out beyond human borders, strange fleet movements had been detected. The Krafthar Dominion, an alien empire with a history of aggression, had been seen sending warships toward the Orion Belt. It was an area rich in resources, dotted with human mining stations and small colonies. The diplomats on Earth had sent warnings to the Krafthar leadership, telling them not to cross into human space. But the Krafthar ignored every message. Ethan knew their kind, had read the reports from the war 40 years ago, before he was born, when the Dominion had tried to conquer a weaker alien race. They were predators, and they only understood strength. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching the stars on the forward display. Somewhere out there, beyond the black, an invasion might already be in motion. The Liberty Dawn's communications officer, Lieutenant Ava Morgan, walked over. She had been monitoring transmissions from the outer colonies. Her face was calm, but her voice was serious. "Commander, more civilian ships are reporting unusual sensor echoes near Vega Station. No confirmed contact yet, but they say the readings match Krafthar signatures." Ethan nodded slowly. "Tell them to stay on high alert and keep their engines hot. If they see anything hostile, they are to retreat immediately. No heroics." Ava gave a sharp nod and returned to her station. Ethan knew that warning the colonies was all they could do for now. Moving the fleet too early could cause panic or even provoke the enemy. But waiting too long could be worse, far below the bridge. In the engineering section, Chief Marcus Hale was checking over the reactor systems. The Liberty Dawn had been in dry dock for upgrades only a month ago, and Marcus was determined that every system would run at 100%. He had been in enough battles to know that a single malfunction could mean the difference between survival and destruction. Meanwhile, in the crew quarters, younger recruits whispered about the rumors. Some had never seen combat, and the thought of facing the Krafthar filled them with both fear and excitement. Veterans kept their thoughts to themselves. They had seen what war looked like. They knew it was nothing like the clean, heroic tales in training manuals outside. Space was quiet, but that quiet was deceptive. The human colonies in the Orion Belt went about their business, miners digging ore, traders moving goods, families settling into new homes under alien skies. Few of them realized how close danger might be. Those who did tried not to think about it. At Mars Naval Command, far from the front, Admiral Henry Carter reviewed the latest reports. His office was filled with maps of star systems, each marked with coded signals from deep space probes. The patterns were troubling. The Krafthar were not moving randomly. They were positioning themselves for something big. Carter knew the Dominion's history of sudden strikes. If their fleet crossed the Vega line, humanity would have no choice but to fight. He leaned back in his chair, thinking of the years of preparation. The rail cannons, the AI targeting systems, the new warship designs, all built for the day when humanity might have to defend itself against the galaxy's predators. That day might be coming sooner than anyone wanted. Back on the Liberty Dawn, Ethan remained on the bridge long into the ship's artificial night cycle. The crew rotated shifts, but he stayed. His eyes kept drifting to the edge of the star map, where the Orion Belt lay. He thought of the miners, the traders, the children, living on those worlds. If the Crathar came, those people would be the first to suffer. When the final report of the day came in, it brought no comfort, only more uncertainty. A deep space probe near the belt had gone offline. No distress signal, no damage reports. It had simply stopped transmitting. Ethan didn't need to be told what that might mean. He gave the order for the crew to be ready to change course at a moment's notice. The Liberty Dawn might soon be heading straight into danger. In the silence of the bridge, the hum of the ship's systems seemed louder than usual. Outside, the stars continued to shine, cold and beautiful, unaware of the war that might soon rage between them. Ethan stood tall, knowing that when the storm came, humanity would not run. They would meet it head-on. The first attack came without a warning. It was still early in the artificial morning cycle on the Liberty Dawn when the emergency transmission arrived. The mining station at Vega 4 had gone silent, and then a single distorted message broke through the static. The voice was panicked, shouting over the roar of alarms. "Oh, they're here." The transmission cut off before the sentence was finished. "Commander." Ethan Price stepped closer to the comm station. "Play it again," he ordered. The sound repeated, filling the bridge with that same raw fear. There was no doubt in Ethan's mind. The Crathor had crossed the line. Lieutenant Ava Morgan's fingers moved quickly over her console. Multiple colonies near Vega are requesting evacuation. Long-range scans show at least 6 unidentified ships moving in from the far side of T. The belt, their configuration matches Crathar designs. Ethan took a deep breath. "Signal Mars Command. Tell them the invasion has started. We're moving to intercept." Across the ship, alarms began to sound. Crew members rushed to their stations. Engineers in the lower decks powered up the rail cannons and missile systems, while navigation plotted the fastest route to Vega. The air on the bridge seemed heavier. Now, every heartbeat counted. In the mess hall, half-finished breakfasts were abandoned as the crew suited up. Young recruits tried to hide their nervousness, their voices low. Some smiled weakly at each other, trying to show confidence they didn't really feel. The veterans didn't smile. They knew what was coming. By the time the Liberty Dawn left warp near Vega 4, the devastation was already visible. The mining station was drifting in pieces, its outer hull ripped apart by weapons fire. Clouds of debris floated silently in space, reflecting the light of the nearby sun. No escape pods were in sight. Ava's voice was steady, but her eyes told a different story, scanning for survivors. Nothing on sensors. Ethan clenched his jaw. He wanted to believe there were still people alive somewhere in the wreckage, but deep down, he knew the truth. Suddenly, the ship's proximity alarm screamed. 6 massive Crathar warships dropped out of warp on the far side of the system. Their black hulls glinted like obsidian knives. The alien ships moved in tight formation, as if daring the Liberty Dawn to come closer. Ethan opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands. This is the commander. The enemy is here. We are the first line of defense. Hold your positions, trust your training, and remember who we're fighting for." The Liberty Dawn turned to meet the enemy. Rail cannons slid into firing position. The Crathar formation broke into 2 groups, one moving toward the colonies, the other closing in on the Liberty Dawn. The first exchange of fire lit up the blackness. The Liberty Dawn's forward rail cannons spat streams of hypervelocity rounds, slamming into the lead Crathar cruiser. Armor plates shattered, sending molten fragments spinning into the void. The alien return fire was brutal beams of green energy slicing across the cruiser's shields. In engineering, Chief Marcus Hale barked orders as damage reports came in. Seal off Section 3. Get the coolant circulation stable or the reactor's going to overload. The Liberty Dawn's shields flickered under the constant barrage, but the crew held their ground. Ava coordinated a missile strike, locking on to the enemy's engine cores. 2 of the missiles found their target, crippling one of the craft Thor. Ships forcing it to drift out of formation. For every hit they landed, another came back twice as hard. The Liberty Dawn shook under the impacts, lights flickering. On the bridge, crew members worked in a rhythm born from training and instinct. Ethan's voice stayed calm as he issued orders, even as the odds pressed against them. Then came the civilian distress call. A colony transport ship, loaded with evacuees, was being chased by 2 Craftthar frigates. It was too far for immediate help, but if they didn't act, it would be destroyed before reaching warp range. Asterisk. Ethan made the call. Helm, break off from the main group. Bring us around toward that transport. Weapons, give those frigates something to think about. The Liberty Dawn roared forward, breaking through the alien line. The rail cannons fired in rapid bursts, forcing the frigates to veer off course. One managed to land a glancing hit on the transport, but it limped forward and jumped into warp dot. Cheers went up in the weapons bay, but they didn't last. More Craftthar ships were appearing on the scanners, and the Liberty Dawn was now deep in enemy-controlled space. Ethan knew they couldn't win here. Not yet. The goal now was to buy time. Every minute they delayed the enemy was another minute for reinforcements to arrive. Every enemy ship they crippled meant fewer would reach the colonies. The battle raged for another hour. The Liberty Dawn dancing between waves of incoming fire. Twice, they came within seconds of losing shields entirely. But through skill, luck, and determination, they kept fighting. When the call finally came from Admiral Carter to fall back to the Vega line, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The Liberty Dawn pulled away from the battlefield, leaving behind the wreckage of 3 destroyed Craftthar ships. The cost had been high, but they had stopped the first wave as they set course for the defensive line. Ethan stood at the forward viewport. The stars stretched endlessly before him, and somewhere out there, more enemy fleets were on their way. The storm had begun, and humanity would need every ounce of strength to survive at Mars Naval Command. Admiral Henry Carter stood at the center of the operations room. The wide circular space was filled with officers monitoring star charts, fleet movements, and communication channels from across human-controlled space. Red markers showed confirmed enemy positions. There were too many reports from the Vega sector, painted a grim picture. The Liberty Dawn had fought hard and destroyed several enemy ships, but the Craftthar were still advancing. The outer colonies were under heavy attack, and civilian evacuations were slow. The enemy pushed past the Vega line. The inner colonies would be next. Carter turned to his strategy officer, Commander Laura Hayes. We need every available warship at the Vega line. Contact fleet groups from the Jupiter and Andromeda sectors. I want them en route within the hour. Laura nodded. Sir, even with reinforcements, they'll outnumber us 3-1. Carter's voice was firm. Numbers aren't everything. Our ships are faster, our weapons hit harder, and our crews fight smarter. We make them pay for every kilometer they take. Across the galaxy, the call to arms spread quickly. Ships from distant patrol routes and training exercises were recalled to the front. Some were old and in need of repairs, but they would have to do. Every ship counted now. On the Liberty Dawn, Commander Ethan Price received new orders to regroup. With the rest of the fleet at the Vega line, his crew worked non-stop to repair damage from the last battle. Sparks flew in engineering as teams replaced fried circuits and patched ruptured coolant lines. The medical bay was busy treating burns, broken bones, and concussions from the earlier fight. Ethan walked through the ship, stopping to speak to crew members. He offered words of encouragement and thanks. He knew morale would be as important as firepower in the days ahead. Lieutenant Ava Morgan joined him near the aft corridor. "The crew's tired, but they're ready, sir. The repairs should be finished before we reach the Vega line." "Good," Ethan said. "We're going to need everything this ship can give." Meanwhile, in a distant sector, Captain Daniel Brooks commanded the stealth frigate Shadowhawk. His mission was not to join the main battle, but to strike deep into enemy territory. The Craftthor supply lines were their weak point. Without fuel and munitions, their massive warships would be stranded. Brooks listened as his intelligence officer outlined the plan. "We'll slip past their patrols using the gas cloud in the Zetanine system. From there, we target their fuel convoys. We hit fast, disappear, and hit again." Brooks smiled faintly. "Sounds simple enough. Let's make it hurt." Back at the Vega line, Admiral Carter oversaw the formation of the defensive wall. The fleet was positioned in layers: fast attack ships in front, heavy cruisers and battleships behind, and carriers further back to launch fighter wings. Mines and automated defense platforms were deployed in key choke points as the Liberty Dawn arrived. Ethan took in the sight of dozens of human warships holding formation. It was an impressive display of unity and strength, but he knew it might not be enough. The Craftthor were relentless. Fleet-wide channels buzzed with chatter as captains compared battle data and discussed tactics. Ava worked with other communications officers to set up encrypted coordination links between ships. The mood was tense, but determined. Everyone knew the Vega line was the last major barrier before the enemy could strike at the heart of human space. If it fell, entire worlds would burn. In the command center aboard the flagship Resolute, Admiral Carter addressed the fleet. Voice carried through every ship, steady and clear. "This is where we hold. The Craftthor believe they can break us. They think humanity is weak. Today, we show them the truth. Fight with discipline, fight with courage, and fight for every life behind this line." Cheers echoed through the channels, though they faded quickly as everyone returned to their duties. Ethan stood at the Liberty Dawn's forward viewport, watching. The stars, somewhere out there, the enemy fleet was gathering. He thought of the miners, the colonists, the families already lost. He would not let their deaths be in vain. In a quiet corner of the ship, two young recruits sat together, checking their gear. One whispered, "Do you think we can win?" The other took a deep breath. "We have to." Far from the Vega line, the Shadowhawk slipped into the dark between stars, its engines running silent. Daniel Brooks stared at the tactical display, watching enemy convoy routes appear in red. Soon, he would make his move. Back at Mars Command, Carter received one last report from scouts near the enemy staging area. The Craftthor fleet was massive, larger than any force humanity had faced before. But he also saw something else: patterns in their formation that suggested overconfidence. Carter allowed himself a small smile. Overconfidence could be used against them. In the days ahead, the fate of countless lives would be decided at the Vega line. The storm was growing. The first lightning was about to strike. The enemy arrived at dawn by the ship's internal clock. The Vega line was quiet one moment, and the next, sensors lit up with dozens of warp signatures. The Craftthor fleet emerged from the void, black hulls glinting in the pale light of the nearby star. They came in tight formation, a wall of destruction moving at full speed. On the Liberty Dawn, Commander Ethan Price stood at the center of the bridge. The crew moved quickly, their voices low but urgent. Rail cannons powered up, missile bays opened, and the shields came online with a soft hum. Lieutenant Ava Morgan reported from her station. "Enemy ships in range in 60 seconds. Ethan nodded. "Hold fire until my order. Let them commit." The human fleet waited. Dozens of warships held position in perfect formation, like a wall of steel. The craft Thor kept coming, their engines burning bright. Then, without warning, green beams of energy tore through the darkness. The first shots of the battle had been fired. Ethan's voice cut through the noise. All ships, return fire. The void exploded with light and sound. The Liberty Dawn's rail cannons roared, sending streams of hypervelocity rounds into the lead. Enemy cruiser. The impact shattered its forward armor, scattering molten debris into space. Missiles streaked from the human lines, their trails glowing against the black. The craft Thor responded with brutal precision. Their beams sliced through the shields of a smaller human frigate, tearing it apart in seconds. The loss hit the fleet hard, but no one broke formation. In the middle of the chaos, Admiral Carter's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. Stay focused. Target their engines and weapons. Make them lose mobility. The Liberty Dawn swung into a flanking position. Ava coordinated with nearby ships, timing missile volleys so they struck in unison. The concentrated fire crippled one of the enemy battleships, sending it drifting out of formation. Chief Marcus Hale reported from engineering. Shields holding at 70%. We've got minor hull breaches on decks 3 and 4, but damage control is on it. Ethan gave a short nod. Keep the power steady. We can't afford a reactor dip. As the battle raged, fighter squadrons launched from the carriers at the rear. Dozens of small craft darted between the larger ships, harassing the enemy with rapid strikes. Some were destroyed in flashes of fire, but others made their mark, knocking out point defense systems and distracting the enemy gunners. The craft Thor pressed forward, but the human fleet refused to give ground. Every kilometer was contested. Every enemy ship that advanced was met with a storm of fire. Ethan could see the determination in his crew's faces. They knew the importance of holding this line. A sudden alarm drew Ava's attention. Commander, 3 enemy destroyers are breaking through Sector 5. They're heading for the carriers. Ethan didn't hesitate. Helm, take us in. Weapons, full power to forward guns. The Liberty Dawn surged forward, cutting across the battlefield. The destroyers opened fire, their beams slamming into the cruiser's shields. The impacts rattled the ship, but the crew held steady. The rail cannons fired in rapid succession, punching holes in the first destroyer's hull. A missile volley finished it off, breaking it apart in a silent explosion. The other 2 destroyers turned their attention to the Liberty Dawn. But that gave the carriers time to launch more fighters. Swarms of small craft fell upon the destroyers, overwhelming them. Within minutes, both enemy ships were reduced to drifting wrecks. Back at the center of the line, Admiral Carter monitored the battle's progress. The craft Thor were losing ships, but they were still pushing hard. The outcome was far from certain. Hours passed in a blur of noise, light, and movement. Damage reports came in faster than they could be addressed. Some ships were forced to withdraw, their hulls torn open. Others fought on despite the damage, refusing to abandon their posts. By mid-battle, the human fleet had destroyed or crippled nearly a third of the enemy force. But the cost was high. Dozens of ships were gone, and casualties were mounting. In the final phase of the clash, Ethan spotted an opening. The craft Thor center had thinned, leaving their flagship exposed. All guns on that flagship, he ordered. Every available weapon turned on the massive enemy ship. Rail rounds slammed into its armor. Missiles tore into its engines, and fighters swarmed over it like angry hornets. Finally, a bright explosion ripped through the flagship. Splitting it apart, the destruction of their command ship sent a ripple of confusion through the remaining craft Thor forces. Some ships broke formation, others began to retreat. The human fleet pressed the advantage. driving them back toward the edge of the system. When the last enemy ship vanished into warp, the Vega line still stood. The price had been heavy, but they had held. On the Liberty Dawn, the crew sat in exhausted silence. Ethan looked around the bridge, feeling both pride and grief. They had won the first major battle. But the war was far from over. The battle at the Vega line had ended, but there was no time to rest. In the hours after the fight, Admiral Carter gathered his senior officers in the command center aboard the resolute holographic maps showed enemy movements in red, while the main Krafthor fleet had been pushed back. Intelligence reports revealed supply convoys moving through unprotected regions of space. "They think they can regroup and come at us again," Carter said, pointing to the enemy routes. "We're going to make sure they never get the chance." His plan was simple but dangerous. Small, fast ships would strike deep into enemy-controlled space to hit their fuel and ammunition convoys. Without supplies, the Krafthor warships would be stranded, or forced to retreat. It was a gamble, but it could turn the tide. One of the key missions was given to Captain Daniel Brooks aboard the Shadowhawk. His stealth frigate was perfect for slipping past patrols. As he prepared his crew, Brooks addressed them with quiet confidence. "We're not here to fight head-on. We're here to cut their legs out from under them. Quick in, quick out." Meanwhile, on the Liberty Dawn, Commander Ethan Price received orders to protect the flanks of the operation. He would lead a small group of cruisers to distract the enemy and draw their attention away from Brooks' route. Ethan met with Lieutenant Ava Morgan in the strategy room. "We'll need to hit hard enough to make them notice, but not so hard that they realize it's a diversion," he said. Ava smirked. "So we just look dangerous without actually being dangerous. I think we can manage." That, within hours, both missions were underway. The Liberty Dawn and its escorts moved toward the Krafthor's forward bases, launching small raids that destroyed sensor outposts and forced the enemy to scramble reinforcements. Far from the chaos, the Shadowhawk glided silently through the shadows of a dense asteroid belt. Its black hull blended perfectly with the darkness. Inside, the crew spoke in whispers as they tracked a massive fuel convoy. 2 freighters, 4 escorts, the sensor officer reported. "They're holding a steady course." Brooks leaned forward in his chair. "Helm, take us in close to that big asteroid. We'll wait for the perfect shot." Minutes passed like hours. Then the moment came. The Shadowhawk's missile tubes opened, releasing a storm of guided warheads. They streaked toward the convoy, striking the first freighter with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion lit up the asteroid belt, sending chunks of debris spinning. The escorts scrambled to respond, but Brooks had already moved. The frigate vanished into the darkness, circling around for another strike. The second freighter tried to break away, but it didn't get far. A concentrated rail cannon burst tore through its fuel tanks, igniting a fireball that consumed the ship. With the convoy destroyed, Brooks ordered a retreat. "No need to stick around and count the wreckage," he said. The Shadowhawk slipped back into deep space before enemy reinforcements arrived, back near the Vega line. Ethan's diversion was working. The Krafthor had diverted several warships to chase the Liberty Dawn, leaving their supply routes even more vulnerable. The cruiser danced around its pursuers, jumping between systems and using hit-and-run tactics to stay one step ahead. In engineering, Chief Marcus Hale was in constant motion, keeping the engines and weapons at peak performance. Every sudden warp jump pushed the systems to their limits, but Marcus refused to let them fail. "We've got 3 enemy cruisers closing in," Ava reported during one tense moment. "Then we'll give them something to think about," Ethan replied. "Target their lead ship's engines. Fire when ready." The Liberty Dawn's forward guns lit up, slamming into the enemy cruiser's rear section. The hit crippled its engines, forcing it to drop out of the chase. The other 2 ships hesitated, giving Ethan time to jump to another system. After 3 days of operations, Carter received word from Brooks. Multiple convoys had been destroyed, and the enemy's supply lines were in chaos. Without fuel, many Krafthar warships were forced to fall back to defensive positions. Carter smiled for the first time in days. The plan had worked. Signal all units to regroup at the Vega line. The enemy's coming back, but this time, they'll be hungry. When? The Liberty Dawn returned. Its crew was exhausted but proud. Ethan walked the decks, knowing every member had played a part in the success. Ava met him near the bridge. Think they'll be ready to quit after this? Ethan shook his head. No, but they'll know we're not easy prey. Far away, in the dark halls of the Krafthar command ship, their warlords argued over the setbacks. Supplies were running low, morale was slipping, and their enemy was proving far more dangerous than expected. Still, their pride would not let them back down. The war was far from over. But for the first time since it began, humanity had struck a blow that Krafthar could not ignore. The human fleet moved deeper into enemy space. Every pilot and crew member knew this was a dangerous mission. The stars outside looked calm, but everyone could feel the tension. They were far from home, and they knew the aliens would not let them come closer without a fight. Captain Laura sat in her command chair, watching the data on the main screen. Her voice was calm, but inside, she was thinking about all the people depending on her. She gave short and clear orders, making sure no one felt panic. Around her, the crew worked quickly, their eyes fixed on their stations. Ethan, the lead engineer, monitored the ship's power levels. He was proud of how well the engines were running, but he was ready to push them harder if needed. He kept his tools ready, knowing that even one mistake in the middle of battle could cost lives. On the communication deck, Maria listened to enemy signals. The aliens were speaking in a language no human could fully understand, but their tone sounded urgent. She marked every strange sound and sent it to the translation system. Slowly, she began to catch short phrases. She could tell they were preparing for something big in the medical bay. Daniel prepared for the worst. He checked his supplies and made sure the medics knew their roles. He hoped he would not have to use the emergency kits, but he had seen too many battles to believe that hope alone would save lives. Hours passed and the human fleet kept moving forward. The alien defense lines were still far, but sensors picked up movement. Dozens of small enemy ships were heading toward them. Crew held their breath as the warning lights flashed across every screen. Laura stood and gave her orders. The fleet spread out into formation. Each warship turned its weapons toward the approaching enemy. The silence before the battle felt heavy, almost like the air itself was waiting. The alien ships came closer. They were fast and moved in strange patterns, trying to confuse the human targeting systems. But the fleet had trained for this. Weapons locked on, and Laura gave the signal. The first blasts of energy lit up the darkness. Explosions flashed in the distance. Some alien ships were destroyed instantly, but others kept coming. The enemy fired back, and the human shields lit up as they absorbed the hits. The ships shook under the force, but they held their ground. Ethan felt the engines strain as the ship dodged incoming fire. He adjusted power flows, pushing more energy to the shields. His hands moved fast, and he kept his focus, ignoring the alarms ringing around him. Maria sent quick messages to other ships, warning them about enemy movements. She noticed that some alien ships were acting like decoys, trying to lure humans into traps. She sent this information to Laura, who quickly changed the fleet's attack pattern. Daniel felt the ship tremble as another blast hit. Soon after, wounded crew members were brought into the medical bay. He worked quickly, cleaning wounds and stopping bleeding. The sound of battle was faint here, but the fear in people's eyes was clear. The fight grew more intense. The human warships pushed forward, breaking through the first enemy line. Alien ships began to scatter, but some stayed to fight. Laura knew the battle was not over. This was only the beginning. As the enemy pulled back, the fleet slowed its advance. Damage reports came in from every ship. Some had heavy damage, but none were lost. The crew felt a small relief, but they knew the next wave would be harder. Laura stood at the center of the command deck, looking at the stars ahead. She could see the glow of the alien home system far in the distance. That was their goal. That was where the real battle would be. The calm they had before was gone. Now the crew moved with the understanding that every step forward meant more danger. Yet no one wanted to turn back. Humanity had come too far to stop now. The fleet moved closer to the alien home system. Every ship carried scars from the last battle, but none had fallen. The stars around them seemed brighter, almost as if they were watching. Everyone knew they were heading into the most dangerous part of the mission. Captain Laura kept her eyes on the main display. The alien home system was still hours away, but their long-range sensors were already detecting movement. A large enemy? Warships were gathering ahead, and there were more than the humans had ever faced at once. Ethan worked with his engineering team to repair minor damage from the last fight. The engines hummed, ready for another push, but he could feel the strain in every vibration. He adjusted power systems to give the ship more speed when they needed it most. Maria stayed at her station, listening to alien communications. The enemy was talking fast, their voices sharp. She did not understand all the words, but the tone was clear. They were preparing for a massive attack. She sent her report to Laura without delay. In the medical bay, Daniel checked on the wounded from the last battle. Some were recovering well, while others needed more care. He promised them they would all make it home, even though he could not. Be sure, his voice stayed calm. But inside, he felt the same fear as everyone else. The fleet entered the outer edge of the alien system. Suddenly, dozens of hostile ships appeared on the radar. They came from all directions, their formation tight and fast. Laura ordered the fleet to form a defensive wall. Every warship locked weapons on the incoming enemy. The first wave hit hard. Energy blasts lit up the space between the fleets. Human shields glowed and shook under the impact. Some enemy ships broke through, but they were quickly destroyed by precise gunfire. The noise of alarms filled every deck, but the crew moved with practiced focus. Ethan diverted extra power to the weapons. The ship's guns fired in rapid bursts, cutting down enemy fighters. Still, more came. He could feel the heat in the engines rising, but he pushed them harder. This was not the time to hold back. Maria spotted a pattern in the enemy attacks. She realized they were trying to surround the fleet. She sent urgent messages to other ships, warning them to pull back and tighten formation. Her quick thinking saved several ships from being cut off. Daniel's medical bay filled with injured crew members. He and his team worked quickly, there, hands steady even as the ship shook from enemy fire. The smell of burnt metal mixed with the sharp scent of antiseptic. The sounds of the battle were distant but constant. The human fleet fought back with everything they had. Missiles streaked through space, striking enemy ships and breaking their formations. Slowly, the aliens began to fall back. Laura saw the opening and ordered the fleet to push forward. This was their chance to break through to the planet. But the aliens were not finished. A second wave appeared, larger than the first. Massive warships, heavily armed, moved into position. Their weapons were powerful enough to pierce even the strongest human shields. The crew braced for impact. The first blasts from the alien capital ships rocked the fleet. One human ship took a direct hit and began to lose power. Laura ordered to nearby ships to cover it while engineers worked to restore its systems. No one wanted to leave a ship behind. Ethan felt the strain in the engines reach the breaking point. He rerouted energy from non-essential systems to keep them running. Sweat rolled down his face, but he did not slow down. If the engines failed, now the entire fleet could be trapped. Maria intercepted a strange alien message. It sounded like a warning to their own ships. She sent it to the translation system, but it was slow. She could only guess what it meant. Still, she shared it with Laura, who prepared the fleet for anything. Daniel treated a young crew member with a serious injury. The medic's hands were covered in blood, but he stayed calm. The ship shook again as another blast hit, but he did not stop. He had been in battles before, but this one felt different, more desperate. The fight raged on for hours. Ships on both sides took heavy damage. Finally, the alien fleet began to retreat. Laura ordered the humans to hold position and regroup. They had made it deeper into enemy space, but the cost had been high. As the battle ended, the stars seemed quiet again, but everyone knew the final fight was still ahead. The alien homeworld was now within reach, and it would take everything humanity had to win. Asterisk. The human fleet moved into position near the alien homeworld. The planet filled the main display, its surface glowing with city lights and defensive energy fields. Every person on board felt the weight of the moment. Fought so many battles, and now the end was near. Captain Laura stood in silence for a long moment before giving the order to prepare all weapons. The crew moved quickly, each one knowing what was at stake. This was the final battle, the one that would decide if humanity would survive or fall. Ethan checked the engines one more time. The constant strain of the journey had pushed them close to breaking, but they still held together. He adjusted the power systems so the ship could move fast when needed. His hands shook slightly, but his focus never left the controls. Maria listened to enemy transmissions. The alien commanders were shouting orders, calling for all ships to defend the planet. She could hear fear in their voices, mixed with anger. She sent translations to Laura, who studied them carefully, looking for a weakness. In the medical bay, Daniel prepared his team. He laid out supplies and checked the beds. He knew the moment the battle began, injured crew members would start. Arriving, his team worked in silence, their faces tense but ready. The alien defense fleet appeared on the horizon. Dozens of massive warships formed a shield around the planet. Their weapons glowed, and their formation was tight. They were ready to protect their home at any cost. Laura ordered the human fleet to advance. The first volley of missiles lit up the dark space between the fleets. Enemy shields flared as explosions hit them, but they stayed strong. Moments later, the alien ships returned fire. The sky filled with bright beams and streaking projectiles. Ethan pushed the engines to their limits, weaving through incoming fire. The ship shook violently, but he kept it steady. The smell of overheated metal filled the air, and warning lights flashed red across his panel. Maria picked up a coded alien signal. It was being sent to their ground forces, telling them to prepare for an evacuation. She shared it with Laura, who realized this meant the enemy knew they might lose. She decided to press harder. Daniel's medical bay came alive with noise and movement as the first wave of injured crew members arrived. His hands worked fast, stopping, bleeding, and setting broken bones. The sound of explosions outside made the walls tremble, but he kept his focus. The human fleet began breaking through the outer enemy line. Missiles tore into alien warships, and precise gunfire disabled their engines. One by one, enemy ships fell apart or drifted powerless into space. But the humans took heavy damage too. A destroyer near Laura's flagship exploded after taking a direct hit, leaving only debris. Ethan rerouted all remaining backup power to the weapons. The ships' main cannons fired at full strength, punching through enemy shields. The heat was intense, and parts of the engine room began to smoke. He ignored it and kept going. Maria intercepted another alien transmission, this one filled with desperation. They were calling for reinforcements, but she could tell the nearest support fleets were too far away to help in time. She relayed this to Laura, who ordered an odd attack. Daniel treated a young officer who had been badly burned. The pain in the officer's eyes was clear, but he still asked if the fleet was winning. Daniel gave a firm nod, even though he knew victory was not yet certain. The final enemy ships around the planet began to fall back. Laura gave the order to target the planet's defense systems. Massive blasts struck the surface, disabling shield generators and silencing key weapons. The alien cities flickered as their power failed. Ethan diverted the last of the reserve energy to keep the ship moving. The engines groaned under the strain, but they pushed forward. Every meter they gained brought them closer to victory. Maria listened as alien transmissions turned into chaos. Some commanders ordered retreat, others called for surrender. The once proud enemy fleet was now in disarray. Daniel's medical bay was full, but his team worked without rest. They saved as many as they could, even as the ship rocked from final enemy strikes. After hours of battle, silence fell over the sea. Comes. The alien fleet was gone, their defenses broken. Laura ordered a ceasefire. The war was over. The human fleet circled the alien homeworld. Else, messages of surrender came from the planet's leaders. Humanity had won, but the cost was written in the faces of every survivor. Laura looked at the planet below and thought about all the lives lost on both sides. She hoped this would be the last time such a war was needed. For now, humanity had proved its strength, and no one would dare ignore them again.